My name is Webster, Fore, and I'm the Director of Content at Hush Harbor Media.
And I'm Justin Warren, one of the editors at Hush Harbor Media, and we are your co-hosts today on today's episode of For the People.
One of the greatest connectors in the human experience is pain. In so many ways, the global pandemic united us along those lines, especially in the Black community. Going along to get along is how so many of us have pressed on in spite of trauma for generations. But what happens when the pain goes too deep to ignore?
In today's conversation, special guest DeVon Franklin joins Pastor Mike and Kamau Bell in a discussion about pain and its relationship to mental health. And we'll be back right after their conversation to reflect on the importance of addressing our pain.
Man, this is a super prolific, amazing brother who has been gifted not only with speech, but with writing. He is a New York Times best-selling author, and he is an in-demand speaker from all kind of different places. He does films, he does preaching, he does motivation. This is our dear brother DeVon Franklin is here with us, and he's going to be our first one up to share with us a little bit of some inspiration in this very heavy time. So everybody, let's welcome to the Match for the People. Tap in.
What's going on, Pastor Mike? What's going on? Kamau, how you doing?
Good to see you. He didn't really explain enough that you're a Hollywood producer, so this is my audition for whatever project you have coming up.
Okay, all right. So far, so good. It's going really well.
Good.
Well, thanks so much, Brother DeVon, for coming on out and hanging out with us. You know, you are one of the premier voices of this generation. I mean, you want to talk about a renaissance, man. Usually it's the jack of all trades and master of none. It seems like you just saying, I'm a master of it all. Everything that God put in my hand,
I'm just trying. I'm just trying to do my part. You know what I mean? If I'm going to do something, I want to do it well. So I'm doing my best to do as many things well as possible with the goal always of, helping people and inspiring as many as I can along the way.
Yeah. Now tell us a little bit about how have you been able to intersect, the different kinds of, I call them life offerings, these streams of life that help get folks through difficult times. When folks hear you speak or read some of your books, life just pours out of it. You want to talk a little bit about the source from where all that comes from? And I could just look at your shirt and maybe just plug your shirt. I don't know how I can get
right.
Shirt. I hope they got them in fat boy sizes because I definitely won't.
Oh man, we got you. Don't worry. They all sizes. We got you. You know what? Honestly, I think the great connector, truthfully, is pain. This is the great connector. And so when I look at the things that, I've been doing, outside of the pandemic, during the pandemic, it's all about connecting with people's pain and doing the best that I can do to help provide solutions for the problem of pain, because that is the number one thing that unites all of us. We all have our source of pain. We all have things that we're going through. And this pandemic has been interesting because what it has done is it's allowed all of us to have a universal source of pain that we can talk about. And for me, the goal is, so often people hear inspiration or they hear motivation. Sometimes it's empty. It's kind of hollow. You hear these tropes, you hear these things. Oh, I feel good. Yeah, what does that mean? No, it's like, how do we address pain? How do we deal with honesty? How do we deal with truth? How do we deal with transparency? Because when we can go to the root of what's going on, and from that an inspirational moment happens or motivational moment happens, that's when it can actually take root in the person's spirit or life. So for me, it's really been about addressing the pain of not feeling good enough, the pain of not knowing what your future looks like, the pain of having these gifts but not knowing how to get them out, the pain of maybe losing a parent. I mean, I lost my father when I was 9 years old. He died of a heart attack when he was 36. And so that was incredibly painful. So all the source of what I do comes from that well of pain and trying to resolve my own and help others resolve theirs as well.
I think a lot of times when the title motivational speaker can get a bad rap because a lot of times their qualifications for being a motivational speaker are I'm a motivational speaker. You know, I passed motivational speaking, so now I'm a motivational speaker. I get a black belt or something. But your resume is such that you have actually done things outside of that sort of would obviously have led you to be a motivational speaker. Can you talk about the work you've done outside of just being a motivational speaker?
Yeah, I mean, look, I say my day job, so to speak. I mean, right now I'm in my office, Franklin Entertainment. I have a production company and a deal with Paramount, along with some other companies, which is in CBS Studios, which is great. So the tree of the trunk from which I inspire, is really entertainment. I've been in entertainment since I was 18 years old. I'm from Northern California, from the Bay. Had a dream to make it in Hollywood. Came down at 18, got an internship for the company that managed Will Smith and Babyface, and had so many ideas and thoughts, but it was an unpaid internship. So it was like, all right, I got this dream to make it, so I had to start at the bottom. Started at the bottom, worked 4 years as an intern, got my degree in business from USC, became an assistant. That was my first job, an assistant to Will's producing partner, answering phones, getting the coffee, doing the scheduling, and then it took me, about probably from the time I graduated to the time of starting my company, 14 years, of being at MGM and then going to Sony Pictures Entertainment. And so, yes, you're right. I don't motivate from a standpoint of just let me be motivational. No, I'm living in a business that's incredibly difficult, that is incredibly high profile. And I've been able to preserve who I am and as along the way, help others. So the goal is like, okay, here's what I'm doing and here's how I can extract some meaning for you and what you may be doing, no matter what your walk of life may be. But drawing from my career in Hollywood, navigating, being a man of faith, in this position, in this environment. And if anything, all the gifts that Pastor Mike was alluding to earlier, all these gifts have come out of being in Hollywood, like being an author, having the opportunity to speak, having the opportunity to inspire. It all comes from being in this business. So you're absolutely right. Like, it's not like being motivational without portfolio. It's really about the motivation being tethered to moments that I've actually had to live through.
Well, speaking of moments to live through, brother, I mean, good Lord, who thought 5 months ago we'd all be homebound? You know what I'm saying? Like,
you tell me.
And it's apropos to have you on, particularly as we're winding down Mental Health Awareness Month. And I know that for many folks who are struggling with just feeling and managing the stress of being, sheltered in place, or some folks are in some very tough situations. What would you say to folks about managing stress and anxiety and taking good care of our mental health in this moment, particularly given this pandemic? This is a global pandemic, and unfortunately, people aren't always able to get the right information to help them understand the seriousness of this moment until someone gets sick or until they get sick. And then it's like, oh man, this is not a hoax, How would you encourage some of our listeners and viewers to take good care of themselves in this time?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to mental health, this is one of the most deceptive areas of our health that we have. If I'm physically sick, I have a cough, I don't feel as good. Immediately, the alarm that something physically is not right is present. And we get a chance to address that, right? If I'm having some financial health issues, all I got to do is check my bank account. Wait a minute, I'm a little sick. I need some relief. But mental health is the quiet, silent killer that all of us, this pandemic is taking a toll on all of our mental health because all of us are addicted to control. This pandemic has taken that from us. We can't control this moment. We don't know when it's going to be over. We don't even know what the future looks like. So all of us have to recognize that our mental health is at risk, and it starts with awareness. So often we talk about, just be strong, just be courageous. And what happens is we live a life of denial. We never get in touch with how we feel. Anything we deny, we empower to destroy us.
Say that again.
Anything we deny, we empower to destroy us. So when we don't take time to just
that sounds like a t-shirt come out. You got to put that on the t-shirt, bro.
That sounds like you thinking about using it for a sermon. I'm thinking about using it for for a show.
Go ahead, man. It's yours. But it's to me, it's true, because what happens is if we don't take a minute to say, "Yo, I'm terrified." I am absolutely terrified. And being honest about how we feel doesn't make us weak. It actually is very courageous. So if we don't take those moments, what happens is we suppress that fear. And then all of a sudden, this fear begins to take toll not only on our mental health, our emotional health, our spiritual health, our well-being. We're short with people. We're frustrated. We're mad. We can't sleep at night. Why? Because we have that one fear that is suppressed, that we haven't taken enough time to say, yo, okay, anybody else is scared out here? And what happens when we have that awareness and then we begin to communicate from that awareness, we realize, oh, I'm not alone. So you're not so I'm not alone. Wait, everybody else is out here scared? Oh, great. Relief. Relief. Okay, cool. So this is what the pandemic, I believe, is doing. It's the great equalizer, I think, in the best way, because it requires all of us to get in touch and have an awareness that all of our mental health can be affected and is being affected. And it starts with just being honest about how we feel, working to not suppress or to be in denial. And know that we're going to make it through this. We will do it. But the key is how we make it through. That's why it's important to talk and express and communicate. Because I want anyone coming through this to come through better, because we learned some of these tools that we otherwise may not have ever used. We may have never communicated to the degree we need to now. But in order to get our mind right, we got to start talking and communicating. And that's what I believe will help us navigate this.
No, absolutely. I think that's especially those of us, I think, that are in a position of privilege to get to know that no matter what happens, we're not going to fall too far on the other side of this. Whereas there's some people who really don't know that they're even going to make it through, you know? Yeah.
No, it's very true. But I think also, though, what you said is true. It's deceptive, though. Because again, our mental health, all of our mental health is being affected. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. There's fear, there's anxiety, there's a little tension. So why it's deceptive is that because let's say we're on the side of the street where we're not going to feel the economic impacts of it, we could then allow ourselves to think we're protected from the mental impact of it, which we are not.
That's true. Absolutely.
So
I
it's
didn't
important.
I apologize.
Yeah, right. You know what I'm saying? So it's important to say, yes, I'm blessed that I don't feel the brunt of it, and I appreciate and I'm grateful for that in terms of the physical, detriment. But let me also be aware with how I'm feeling, so that mentally I'm maintaining my mental health and not allowing that to suffer silently.
No, I feel like any married couple who gets through this married deserves some sort of award. Because
I agree with you.
Just if you make it through when they go, we have a vaccine, everything's great. If you're still married, then there needs to be some sort of celebration.
Ooh, man, I've been married for 8 years, man. I know what you're saying. Yes. So true.
Yes. Well, as we get ready to let you go here, I wonder if you could say a word about the importance of being generous in the time of scarcity.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, generosity has two impacts. One, yes, just as a great, moral, altruistic thing to do, we should be generous. The other thing, though, that I have noticed about generosity, when you feel at your lowest and you help somebody else, as you help someone else rise, you rise too. So generosity is, even if you look at generosity as selfish, still do it. If you want to feel better, help somebody else feel better. That's how it works. And in this instance, giving, to this campaign, which is incredible and needed, help somebody else with their safety, and you're going to get help with your safety. That's how it works. And so I believe what you all are doing is amazing, and getting the funding you've gotten is great. But I also encourage anyone watching right now, let's be generous. Let's sacrifice just to make sure that others are protected. And I guarantee you, by doing good, you're going to feel good.
Man, this brother DeVon Franklin, I think we need to make you our spokesperson. Take you all. just bring me that shirt when we come out of quarantine. I want that dope fake. I got a Hope dealer shirt, but I need a update.
I got you. Don't worry. I got you.
Well, thanks so much for coming on and joining us. And we will continue to support you and your work and give my best to your amazing, stupendous, magnanimous, talented partner, wife. Amen. We got a chance to work here on Erica's video. So tell Sister Megan Good that the bootleg preacher said hello. And,
I will. I will. It's good to see you come out.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. God bless.
Thank you.
Wow. What a powerful conversation. DeVon Franklin definitely gave us a lot to think about. Just this whole idea of pain being such a great connector.
Yeah, it's the one thing that we all have in common. Like, it's so easy for us to constantly focus on our differences, but truly the one universal thing that we all experience on the daily is pain. You know, it's another thing you said that really that jumped out to me was, he said, anything we deny, we empower to destroy us.
Yeah.
Which really resonates with me, because I feel like so much of pain that we cause in our lives comes from denying the pain that we feel. And the first step to healing is acknowledging that you feel pain. So the more you deny pain, the more you are really more or less destroying yourself. And when it comes to mental health, you're destroying yourself from the inside out. So
it's so true. I feel like, you know, it's kind of embedded in our culture in ways. Like when you think about someone saying, hey, how are you doing today? What's the standard answer that we give?
I'm great.
Exactly.
Fine. Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah. And it's said a lot of times with a big smile and through clenched teeth when, you know, inside we're hurting. And then, you know, a lot of times there's this idea that, like, by even saying that you're hurting or acknowledging that you're not okay, that is somehow a sign of weakness. And,
right.
You know, it's very counterproductive. And it's also very isolating when you think about it, too. And it's a sad situation that we would come to feel isolated in our pain when it's something that everybody feels, and it's something that everybody at some point in their lives will be going through.
Absolutely. And isolation is, I think, the perpetuator of emotional distress. The more you have a concept of, oh man, I'm the only person feeling this pain, the more you see yourself as separated from humanity, from our common humanity. And that is a really, really deceptive thought that can really lead to really bad places. Multiple friends of mine have lost someone who had a mental health crisis throughout this pandemic. We have a classmate who took his own life during this pandemic. And I guarantee you, the nugget of that thought, it was a moment of weakness that a very, very talented person had. And I guarantee you, underneath all of that pain was this feeling of, I'm alone and there's nothing I can do to get out of it, you know? So the first step to healing is acknowledging that, yeah, pain is the common thing that unites all of humanity. And if we're all united in our pain, that means we don't have to be alone. We don't have to feel alone. We don't have to believe that lie that we are beyond grace.
Absolutely. You're so spot on, Justin. 2020 in so many ways was eye-opening for the world, even as we went through a global pandemic that, you know, in a lot of ways kind of brought us together. It was a very isolating experience. You know, the whole idea of being on a lockdown, not being able to, you know, being part of your routine, to see people in person, like that was a pressure cooker situation and a perfect storm in a lot of ways, so that people who maybe had mental health struggles already, you know, it intensified it, but it also was very revealing for other people who might have always thought that they were okay, to realize, whoa, there was something already brewing under the surface here. And having everything in my life, all the routines and everything I've known to come to a full stop now is exposing it, because, sometimes it can be really easy to become busy with being busy for busy's sake. It allows us to be able to, avoid things, avoid pain, avoid having to do that inner work, because that's scary. It's the stuff that you can't see. It's the stuff that you feel, but it's something that you can, for a good amount of time, ignore. The pandemic, it brought out a lot of things. And when it came to the area of mental health, there were a lot of people that struggled. And I mean, in real ways, like you mentioned with our classmate, he's a perfect example of someone who we always saw smiling. He was the life of the party. For those of us who are closer with him, we saw that more introspective side. When the doors close and you're all alone, it's like those are those moments when the deepest, darkest, and scariest thoughts sometimes can bubble to the surface. And so it becomes a life or death situation then for us to be able to be present to how we're feeling before it gets to a crisis level situation, but also to just treat our mental health like health.
Absolutely. Yes.
It's just like going to get a physical, making sure that you're exercising and doing, eating right or doing these things to make sure that you're physically well. It's like we really do have to get into a habit of making sure that we're mentally well too before it gets to a crisis.
Absolutely. Mental health takes constant maintenance. Like if you want to lose some weight, it's like, okay, well, I should probably go to the gym. I should probably eat a little less fat. I should, there's very practical things that are kind of common knowledge, but are also difficult to do, because everything starts in your mind. One of the things that has helped me a lot, I've struggled with my mental health. I've had moments in my life where I've had deep mental health struggles with depression, with obsessive compulsive disorder, a ton of little things that manifest itself in your life in different ways. And I've really, in the last couple of years, made a commitment to actively fight depression in my life every day, right? So the same way that it's like, all right, I want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, so I've got to go to the gym, right? It's like, all right, I want to try to have a healthy, very level, balanced reaction to the extreme parts of life, right? Which, the pandemic was extreme for all of us, right? So for me, I've had to, first off, accept the fact that I am vulnerable to feeling bad in my mind. And I've had to develop literally like kind of a toolkit for how to constantly address my mental health and make sure that I am giving myself the support that I need. Because that's another thing I think that is difficult about mental health, is that a lot of times it's like, okay, well, who do I share it with? Like, who do I talk to? Who do I talk to in a way that I don't overwhelm them, and because a lot of times it can be tough to open up about these things, because it can, at least for me, it can trigger guilt and shame of just like, man, why can't I keep up with the people on Instagram? Like, why can't I, like, what's wrong with me? And it's a deceptive trap that you can fall into. But I have found, and one thing in particular that's very practical for me is whenever I start to feel squeezed, when it feels like the walls are closing in, the first thing to do is, first off, to recognize it. And then the first thing I do usually is go take a walk. I know it sounds super simple, but it's amazing how much just getting outside, away from a screen, away from an internet connection, and just being. It's amazing how much that can do to release the pressure of just mental anguish.
Absolutely. I mean, you've touched on so many powerful points. I think one of the go-tos that I have had in those moments where I felt like that feeling of suffocating or just feeling like I'm trapped is literally just hopping into the car and driving over. There's a specific spot at the beach here in LA, and I don't even get out of the car when I go, but literally driving over there, parking and looking out at the horizon, it does a few things. I mean, you know, we all know the therapeutic nature of just being by the water, but also just seeing over the horizon. It just lets me know that there's a great big world out there that's bigger than my problem. I'm reminded of the God that created this great universe, and just knowing that ultimately whatever it is that I'm dealing with, it's going to pass on just like those waves that I'm looking at. It literally, like, I just feel like a weight off my shoulder when I go to that space. And it's something else that you brought up too that I think is very important to note, is that this is a marathon. I mean, the journey of life that we're on, it being well in all aspects is very much a marathon. It's like if we have a sprinter's mentality about our mental wellness in particular, it's going to be a rough ride, because, you know, a lot of times, like, people say, oh, well, I'm going to just, you know, they'll find some fad thing that they're going to do for the moment to make them feel good. And that's not a bad thing on the surface, but if there's not a cadence of making sure that, you know, you keep a pulse on how you're feeling, but also kind of even paying attention in your environment to what the triggers are, it can create some challenges. For instance, you know, we know that there's all kinds of environmental things that occur. There's traumas that we just can't even control, but there's other things, like something as simple as like not knowing when to say no, that can kind of create a snowball effect. You know, like we want to please people, or we want to show up for people, and that is very important. But on the list of people that you show up for, you have to also show up for yourself. You know, I think sometimes we put a lot of celebration behind the idea of someone being selfless, but I think we do not often enough check in on the person who's doing a selfless act to see, like, hey, are you pouring from an empty cup? Are you okay? Do you need me to hold space for you? Sometimes when people aren't able to do that and you're the person that's being selfless, like, you know, it becomes incumbent on you, if you're going to continue to be the person that's showing up for everybody else, to make sure that you're okay, because you hold a critical role not only for other people, but for yourself. You have to be well in order to be well for others.
Absolutely. It's just like that metaphor of like the oxygen mask on an airplane, you know, like put on your mask first before you put on the mask of someone else. And you know, that's a commonly quoted metaphor, but it's so true. And it's easy to feel like exactly what you were saying, that somehow it's selfish to care for yourself first, to fill your own cup first before you fill someone else's cup, because you can't, when you're empty and you're pouring into people, you're functioning from a deficit at that point. And you'll never, ever be able to give other people what they need if you can't even, first off, recognize what you need. My wife in particular, we talk a lot about journaling, because she's always like, I try to do it, and I start thinking like, why? What's the point? You know? But it's one of those habits that first off takes a long time to kind of drill in. But it takes a long time to start seeing the benefits of journaling, because it's only when you start to string together a bunch of days of like, wow, today I felt like this. And then trying to ask why. What was it that made me feel that way? Oh, maybe it was that guy who looked at me the wrong way when I left the grocery store, and then said that thing. And so many little tiny moments like that happen all the time. And as Americans, we're going so hard that it's so easy to just to basically have someone basically throw a little dart at you and it lands, but you didn't even realize because you were going too fast, you know? You're just trying to get to the next thing. And when you stop and sort of unpack your life, you start to realize like, oh man, that hurt me. Oh man, that hurt me. That hurt. This other thing hurt me. And you start to realize, oh man, there's a lot of damage going on here on the regular, right? We're all constantly moving through life at such a pace where sometimes we don't even realize the damage that we're receiving from others and the damage that we're doing to others. sometimes we're not even aware of that. And journaling is a great connector, because like journaling is one step of the process, but reflecting and going back and reviewing your journal is really the magic sauce of journaling, because you start to see patterns in your life that you otherwise wouldn't see when you're just going 100 miles per hour. You know, that I think ties back to what you were saying about this being a marathon. It's only when you start to reflect on the daily stuff that you start to see patterns. And when you see patterns, then you can start to make changes, you know, and that's where journaling starts to get really powerful.
Absolutely. I can definitely attest to the idea of, of journaling too. But something that I did more so when I was younger, pre-social media days. Now, people tend to use social media like their journal, and there's a lot of layers that go on with that. I don't necessarily have a firm opinion about it being right or wrong. I think it just kind of depends on the person. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we have safe spaces to be able to, like you said, to process and emote in however way we will, and I think that also helps with having just a positive outlet so that we don't find ourselves kind of falling into vices that become crutches that then become, a slippery slope to other things where we either hurt ourselves or we're hurting other people. And then just, even beyond journaling, certain things like everybody says, oh, you need a therapist, get a therapist. And then there's like the other ongoing dialogue about how in the Black community, there's such a stigma around mental health. And there is, but I would argue that stigma is something, again, that's very American, because, even though there's people that readily talk about getting mental health support, I feel like there was quite some time where it was still kind of like a hush thing. Like it was either, oh, that's what rich people do, or that's what white people do, all that kind of talk. We all need to, consider what other support outside of ourselves could be helpful, whatever that help is. But specifically with the Black community, I think that we have had so many compound traumas that for a long time, our people have been in survival mode. And we are just now in these more recent generations, even having the bandwidth to look up and do something other than survive. And so I think for that, there's a blessing in it, because it's like, well, now we have time to look up and reflect and say, oh, you know what? We've been ignoring this the whole time. Maybe we should have gotten some help for that. But hey, today is the day where we can change, what we were doing in previous generations and try something different. Our ancestors got us to this point. Thanks so much. Y'all did an awesome job. We're going to take it, basically take the baton and go the next step. And that is like, now let's go to measures of making sure that we thrive. And part of thriving is not just financial. It's like, again, in our American way of doing things, we focus so much on capitalist gain as a measure of success, but mental health is also a part of that measure. Kind of just sharing a personal story. I remember during graduate school, there was like a cluster of things that happened in succession where I got to my breaking point. And I remember walking around just inside feeling like I'm not okay. And it wasn't as casual as I'm making it sound now. It felt like something's about to break. Yeah. And what I had to realize is really what was going on at that period of time in my family and just in life in general was a straw that broke the camel's back, as opposed to, the crisis that broke through some new condition or way of being. I had been pouring from an empty cup for years. I had been working jobs where I was like working 16 plus hours a day with like ridiculously long commutes, sometimes having to stay overnight where I was at, like freelancing, sometimes not knowing where my next paycheck would come from when a gig would end. And then there was just all kinds of different things on top of being over 3,000 miles away from my hometown and, just trying to find my way out in a state so far removed from everything I knew to be normal before I had been kind of just running on fumes and saying I'm tired or I'm, kind of getting to the point of being burned out. I just was like, no, you got to keep going. You got to go. You got things to do. We don't have time for that. And so when crisis struck years later and my cup was way beyond empty, I reached my breaking point. And I remember feeling so isolated and embarrassed. One, that I got to that point, but then two, because I felt like to acknowledge it was basically being weak, because everybody else I had seen, my mom, everybody had always just kept going. That's all we were supposed to do. Like, you didn't have time for that. I finally, got to a point where I was like, I need to talk to someone about this. And I just knew I needed to talk to a therapist. And I'm so thankful that I did. Even though they didn't magically solve all my problems or anything, there were tools, and there was, like you said, tools and language around these different feelings, these different experiences that were kind of deep set and scary. It helped me to be able to face them, one. And then number two, they began to kind of share different simple things that could be done to, one, recognize the signpost, and then two, be able to face and manage it when it arose. And so it's been a journey ever since, but I definitely stand a bit taller because of having gone through that valley experience and, being to a point where I didn't have any more answers and did have to seek outside of myself for help. So now, when the same issues sometimes want to arise in terms of that darkness, or, in my case, anxiety and depression and some symptoms of PTSD, I realize now, like, oh, I don't have to wait till there's like a raging dumpster fire happening in order to seek support. I can see like small signs and say, oh, I know what that is. Let me make some adjustments so that I can prevent the raging dumpster fire from happening. And I think that's really the most you can ever do on this marathon experience.
Exactly. And in America, I mean, we wait till the building's on fire before we do something about it. That's just culturally how we do it here, So my wife and I, we just started a little garden outside. We have a garden in our back, right? I used to be somebody we both used to be people who, like, we just didn't have plants around because they're going to die. Like, we're going to forget to water them, and we're going to have like a whole thing full of dead plants, right? Well, we have made it a commitment, right, to try to keep these plants in the back alive. And in many ways, we're on week 5, and I'm happy to report that all the plants are still alive, which is really great, right?
All right now.
But it's taken an intentional way to tune into something, to tune in to life, right? Because plants are so easy to ignore, right? Because they're just there, like, oh yeah, it's green, whatever, right? For some reason, having to tune into the fact that, like, hey, is that thing alive? Is it still alive? How's it doing? Does it need some water? You have to take that exact same intentionality with your mental health, right? Because if you leave the plants just to nature, they're either going to die or they're going to be overtaken by weeds, and the weeds are you're going to look up and you're going to be like, where's my garden? It's gone now. It's been completely overrun. And then at that point, it's too late to call the gardener. You know what I mean? We have to, whether we like it or not, our minds are gardens, right? And things are getting planted in our minds all the time, right? We have to be careful of what gets planted in our minds and what we allow to grow, right? Sometimes we have to take weed killer and be like, hey, that's not a good thought for me, right? I know for a fact that when I check my Instagram in the mornings, it affects my day differently, right? I can tell the days when I am glued to my phone and my level of anxiety, right? So I have to be very intentional about what I allow into my mind, because the things we allow into our minds are the things that come out, right? The whole concept of garbage in, garbage out is so critical to our mental health. It's totally, it's the way it works. If you put good things in your mind, good things will probably come out. If you allow bad things into your mind, probably bad things will come out. So, and it's tough too, because we're so bombarded by media all the time. everywhere you go. Like try to get through one day in modern American culture without somebody trying to tell you that you're not good enough so you can buy something. You know, it's like, hey, I know you're insecure about your skin. Why don't you buy some of this and it'll make you feel good? You know, I mean, like, if you think about it, we're constantly bombarded by advertising messages that prey on our insecurities. And that's almost all of capitalism right there, 21st century capitalism. So we have to be careful. We have to be mindful of it all the time and stay vigilant.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, we cannot be consumed by what we consume. There's got to be that balance. And, you know, at every step of the way, us just finding those tools and those outlets to be able to just be. I think the state of being is something that, like, the more I think about it, it's a radical concept, like, because we are, like you said, with capitalism, we're driven towards productivity and results. And, you know, the slow burn stuff is not so fun. It's not as sexy. So we kind of just push that to the side. But like literally putting more investment into being is huge, because, you know, you're not projecting anything at that point. You're not trying to sell an idea. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're just literally at a base level of being present, you know, instead of looking for the next thing down the road. You are literally where you are as you are. And there's got to be some form of acceptance that can come with that. And if, you know, you're not happy with where you are or what you're being or doing at that moment, that's okay. Like, it allows room for grace to say, hey, maybe today wasn't my best day, but I brought it my best. And so here I am. But then it also gives you room from a more level spot to just figure out, okay, well, what's the next step from here, as opposed to feeling like you have to just continue tripping over yourself and running over yourself and putting on a false face and, you know, trying to check all of these boxes on a dumb list that everybody seems to have a hard time keeping up with, if we're just being honest. You know, being real and, you know, just sometimes giving ourselves a break. That doesn't mean we have to slack off or, you know, or be lazy or anything, but it's like, it's also not lazy to just pump the brakes and rest and sit still.
Absolutely. You know, like I think that my definition of therapy is kind of changing and shifting, right? Like I've done a lot of traditional therapy, like talk therapy, where you sit and talk to someone, you know, and I've also done PTSD therapy. It's been very effective, but all therapy really means is just intentional healing. That's all that it is.
Yeah.
And so if going to talk to someone sounds too overwhelming or too intrusive, just merely setting aside some time to intentionally heal is a huge first step. Playing basketball for me is very therapeutic. I'm terrible at basketball. I'm hilariously bad at basketball, but for some reason it's like, all right, if I'm feeling really, really stressed out, you know, I'm just going to go shoot some hoops for a little bit. Just for a little bit. It doesn't have to be for a long time. It can be for 10 minutes. For 10 minutes, I'm going to go shoot some hoops. And I guarantee you, if you intentionally do something that you know fills you up in a moment where you are super duper overwhelmed and stressed, even for 10 minutes, I guarantee you will make a dramatic difference in your mental health. And it took me a long time. I'm glad you touched on the topic of grace, because as believers, like, we have to embrace grace more. You know what I mean? Like, grace is the oil of life, really. You know what I mean?
It really is.
Yeah. An ultimate act of grace and radical grace for yourself is to stop the suffering, because you can go, hey, no, I'm going to intentionally do something to heal right now. Go, and then go do that thing, even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes. You'll get that back in dividends in terms of space, as you were saying.
Absolutely. So you hit on another important point, which is and being intentional. You know, a lot of times we can be tossed and driven by circumstance. And circumstance is like the one thing in our lives that we actually can't control. Like we feel like we're in control, but 2020 already blew the lid off all that. So we know like we're not in control, sure, of circumstance. That's what it is. However, in being intentional, it is like a grounding piece, because it allows us to be in control of what we in ourselves do. You know, it's like sometimes circumstances might bring out a response that you don't expect, or it might affect you in a way that you don't anticipate, but being intentional to say, my goal is to make sure that I'm okay. We're going to start with that, so that on a day when you're not okay, then the goal is to make sure you get back to okay and doing what you need to do to make sure that you're good. Or just being intentional when you are A-okay to say, hey, I'm happy right now. I'm in a good place right now. So I want to keep a cadence of things that bring me joy. One of the things that brings me joy is traveling. And you think, oh man, that's so bougie. Like, why you want to travel? But you can travel on affordable terms if that's your thing. You know, some people, they say, oh, I just like to be able to cook a fine meal, or I like you said, to be able to take a walk. Pets and plants are two other areas that bring, you know, that can bring some sort of peace and joy. Like I've had my dog since 2015. He was 6 weeks old, and he is just a joy. No matter what's going on in the day, like whenever I walk through that door, and no matter how long I've been gone, even if I've literally only been gone for like 15 minutes, he jumps up and he's so excited.
I haven't seen you for a full 15 minutes.
He'll like run laps through the house and like jump up. And it's just like, you know, it's like almost like whatever happened in the day just melts away. And then, you know, even like you were talking about before with the plants, like I love plants too. And one of the things that I really love about plants, in addition to the things that you said, is I actually made a very conscious decision when I bought certain plants to buy them as like saplings or babies. I don't know. I'm not a botanist or anything, so I don't know if that's the right word. But when they were small, I could have bought the big one and it just would have been beautiful, and, you know, we would have moved on. But what I loved about buying the plants when they were small is that over the course of months and eventually years, there'll be a story to those plants. You know, I can say, hey, I got it when it was like 3 inches tall, and now it's like it's flourishing and it's this. And also it connects to life too, because you don't always get it right. Like I've read so many articles online and looked at so many dumb videos about how to care for certain plants, and sometimes those plants are just not having it. Like, so there's like a journey of like trial and error. Like, okay, like there's a lot of factors that are affecting how this plant is doing right now. It's sunlight, and then there's also water, and then there's also soil. Like there's a lot of things that you have to take into account, and so that really takes it right back to us too. You know, maybe today the walk works, tomorrow the walk might not work. It might be a series of things that we have to do to make sure that we're centered and that we're okay. And so, you know, just bringing it full circle to the idea, being intentional about our mental health is key. There's no one perfect cure-all for anyone. And so, you know, we're not mental health professionals and can't tell people what to do. But the idea is that you turn over every stone until you find what it is that, you know, that works for you. And everything does not cost money. However, you know, that doesn't excuse us from being intentional about our mental health and doing things that whatever fits in our budget can be done in order to make sure that we're whole and that we're well and that we're our best selves.
Amen. Another thing DeVon said that really stuck with me is by doing good, you're going to feel good. And that ties into talking about generosity, right? And generosity, I think, is absolutely tied to your mental health. And what I mean by that is, like, if you can find the strength to be generous in the darkness, then in many ways you're kind of invincible at that point, right? Because you are making a conscious, intentional effort to do good when it doesn't make sense. And that is so empowering, right? Because it's like you said with your plants. If you take time to water your plants, that's only going to make your plants stronger, right? Which in a weird way makes you stronger, you know, because you caused you had an impact in the world, right? And when you have an impact in the world, it's really hard to let that feeling of I'm alone and I don't matter stay in your brain, you know? Like that is a very, very quick, easy way to push negative thoughts out of your brain, is to like, you know what? I feel awful, but in this moment, I'm going to choose to do something good. And that's the thing too, like good can mean really anything. What does it mean to you? Good can mean sending someone a message, sending someone an email. Hey, I just want to like affirm what you did. Hey, I appreciate you. Yeah. And you can do it out of the blue too. You don't have to wait for something to be like, okay, now's my time to do good. In fact, it's better when you do it out of the blue and you expect nothing in return. Generosity is deeply connected to our sense of well-being. And it ties us to the community. You know, it makes you not just exist in a vacuum.
Absolutely.
Because when you're in a vacuum, that's where you can easily start to believe that I am worthless and I don't matter.
Exactly. And it's very important that we remember that we matter, that we have something to offer to this world. And in order for us to operate in our purpose and in our fullest sense, we have to make sure that mentally, physically, and in every other way that we are at our best. And that takes work. And so I hope that something of what we said today will be an inspiration for the people.
For the people.
Thank y'all so much for listening today. I really hope that something of what we said was an inspiration for you to take good care of your mental health. My name is Webster Fore.
And I'm Justin Warren. And we thank you for listening to today's episode of For the People.